The lawyer smiled with confidence. It was the kind of smile that said the case was already won. Papers were ready, arguments were polished, and the story had been told the same way many times before. The father sat quietly, listening as accusations were laid out against him. To everyone in the courtroom, it looked like another routine hearing. Then the father stood up and asked one simple question. "May we review the CCTV footage?" The smile disappeared. And in that moment, the balance of the courtroom shifted. In court, stories are powerful. Whoever controls the narrative often controls the outcome. Lawyers are trained to shape facts into convincing arguments, and judges must decide based on what they hear and what they see on paper. But sometimes the truth doesn't live in words. It lives in recordings, timestamps, and quiet details no one expects to matter. This story is about how confidence can collapse when evidence speaks, and how patience can be stronger than performance. From the very beginning, the case looked simple to everyone watching. The opposing lawyer walked into the courtroom with confidence that could be felt in the air. Every step, every movement, every smile suggested control. This was not their first case like this. They had done this many times before. They had stood in the same room, told similar stories, and watched judges nod along. They knew how to frame facts, how to shape emotions, and how to guide attention away from uncomfortable details. To them, this was routine. The father, in contrast, did not look impressive. He did not wear a designer suit. He did not arrive surrounded by assistants or legal advisors whispering into his ear. He sat quietly at his table, hands folded, eyes forward. Some might have mistaken his silence for fear. Others might have assumed he had nothing to say. But silence, in his case, was not weakness. It was discipline. He had learned through months of pressure that reacting emotionally only helped the other side. The lawyer began speaking with a smooth, confident tone. They described an incident involving the father and his child, painting a picture of irresponsibility. According to the story, the father had failed to supervise properly. According to the story, the child had been placed at risk. According to the story, this single moment revealed a deeper pattern of careless behavior. Each sentence flowed easily into the next. The lawyer smiled gently as they spoke, as if they were simply stating facts that everyone already understood. The judge listened carefully. Judges are trained to listen without reacting. They hear stories all day, every day. They know that confidence does not equal truth, but they also know that first impressions matter. At this stage, the lawyer controlled the narrative. The father was being described, not heard. His actions were being interpreted for him. And in court, interpretation can be dangerous. As the lawyer continued, they referenced witness statements, written reports, and timelines that supported their version of events. Nothing sounded extreme. Nothing sounded outrageous. That is often how effective manipulation works. It stays close enough to reality to feel believable. It avoids dramatic lies and instead relies on selective truth. A detail emphasized here. A context removed there. Slowly, the picture shifts. The lawyer smiled again, briefly, as if satisfied. It was the smile of someone who believed the hardest part was over. They had planted the story. Now all that remained was for the judge to accept it. Throughout all of this, the father did not interrupt. He did not shake his head. He did not whisper angrily to his attorney. He stayed still. He had learned something important over the past year. When someone is building a false narrative, the most dangerous thing you can do is interrupt too early. Let them commit fully to the story. Let them lock themselves into it, because once they do, evidence becomes impossible to escape. The father had prepared for this moment quietly. While accusations were made, he had been collecting facts. While stories were told, he had been documenting reality. He knew that arguing with words would not help him. Words could be twisted, emotions could be questioned. But footage could not argue back. Footage could not forget. Footage could not exaggerate. The incident in question had taken place in a public area, a space covered by multiple security cameras. At the time, the father didn't think much of it. He had done nothing wrong. He had followed safety rules. He had stayed attentive. Only later, when accusations began appearing in legal documents, did he realize the importance of what those cameras had captured. At first, he assumed the truth would be obvious. But as the case progressed, he saw how easily reality could be reshaped by confident storytelling. That was when he decided to request copies of the CCTV footage. It wasn't easy. It required time, persistence, and patience. He had to submit formal requests, follow procedures, and wait. All while accusations continued to grow. The lawyer on the other side likely assumed he was overwhelmed. They likely assumed he was unprepared. Many people are. Many parents walk into court with only their feelings and hope that the truth will somehow speak for itself. But the truth does not speak unless it is given a voice. The father understood this. When the lawyer finished presenting their argument, there was a brief pause. The judge looked down at their notes, then back up. This was usually the moment when the accused party responded emotionally, defensively, or angrily. Instead, the father's attorney stood and spoke calmly. No accusations, no counterstory, just a single request. They asked the court for permission to review CCTV footage from the day of the incident. The lawyer's smile disappeared almost instantly. It was subtle but noticeable. Confidence turned into calculation. They hadn't prepared for this. Not because CCTV footage is unusual, but because they believed the narrative was strong enough without it. They believed the story would stand on its own. The judge paused. Judges are careful with evidence. They consider relevance, authenticity, and procedure. But they also understand the value of objective truth. After a brief review, the judge allowed the footage to be played. As the screen turned on, the courtroom grew quiet. This kind of silence is different. It is heavy. Everyone knows that once footage begins, there is no more interpretation. There is only observation. The video played without sound at first. Grainy, ordinary footage. Nothing dramatic. Just real life unfolding. The father appeared exactly where he said he was. His child stayed close. His movements were calm, attentive, protective. The moment that had been described as careless looked completely different when seen instead of told. The timeline mattered. The spacing mattered. The distance mattered. Details that had been stretched in words collapsed when measured in seconds. The supposed danger never existed. The supposed neglect never happened. The child was safe the entire time. As the footage continued, the judge leaned forward slightly. That movement spoke volumes. Judges don't react easily, but they react internally. The lawyer avoided looking at the screen, instead flipping through papers as if searching for something that could save the narrative. But nothing could. The video ended. The courtroom remained silent for a few seconds longer. Silence is powerful in moments like this. It gives truth time to settle. The judge began asking questions. Calm, direct questions. Why did the written statement describe a different sequence of events? Why was the father's proximity misrepresented? Why was the timing exaggerated? These were not emotional questions. They were procedural. And procedural questions are the most dangerous kind. The lawyer attempted to respond. They spoke about interpretation, perspective, and witness impressions. But interpretation no longer mattered. Perspective no longer mattered. The footage had established a baseline reality that could not be crossed. What became clear was not just that the lawyer's story was inaccurate, but that it had been confidently inaccurate. And confidence without accuracy damages credibility. Once credibility cracks, everything else follows. The judge did something important next. They asked whether similar allegations had been made before. The file was thick, the history long. As pages were reviewed, a pattern emerged. Claims that sounded serious but dissolved under scrutiny. Complaints that relied heavily on interpretation rather than evidence. The father had never accused the other side of lying. He never needed to. The record spoke for itself. His consistency stood in contrast to the shifting stories presented against him. At that moment, the courtroom dynamic changed completely. The father was no longer defending himself. He was being understood. The lawyer was no longer leading the room. They were responding to it. The judge addressed the father directly. Not with sympathy, but with acknowledgement. They recognized the effort it took to remain composed under repeated accusations. They recognized the importance of evidence over emotion. And most importantly, they recognized the difference between storytelling and truth. The ruling that followed was firm. The court dismissed the specific allegations tied to the incident, but more than that, the judge issued a warning. Future claims would require stronger evidence. Repeated misrepresentation would not be tolerated. The court was not a stage for performance. It was a place for facts. For the father, the victory was quiet. He did not smile broadly. He did not celebrate. He simply exhaled. Months of stress lifted slightly from his shoulders. He had not won by being louder. He had won by being prepared. What this case revealed goes far beyond one courtroom. It shows how easily confidence can be mistaken for truth. How easily a calm story can override reality when no one challenges it. And how powerful objective evidence becomes when someone is patient enough to wait for the right moment. CCTV footage did not just show what happened that day. It showed who was telling the truth all along. And once the truth was visible, no smile, no argument, and no performance could hide it again. In the end, the ruling was clear. Evidence mattered more than confidence. Truth mattered more than presentation. And silence, when paired with preparation, proved more powerful than any argument. The lawyer's smile had faded, but something more important had emerged. A reminder that in court and in life, the truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be seen.